she discovered his amazing strength while moving furniture, transforming her view on love forever. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue over the neighborhood as Sarah stood outside her grandmother's home. The wisteria vines clung stubbornly to the trellis, like memories she couldn't shake off. The upcoming family reunion loomed large, and the thought of along-for-the-ride holdouts made her heart race. Alone, she fingered the key, debating whether to brave the chaos inside. The house had been neglected for years, much like her own desires. With a deep breath, Sarah turned to her new neighbor, Jake, whose rough exterior immediately set off alarm bells in her mind. She recalled her mother's warnings about men like him, blue-collar, always battling the odds. But curiosity gnawed at her. His laughter, however rough, seemed genuine, a stark contrast to the polished veneer of her workplace. Wasn't she tired of the same old script? Stuck in cycles built by expectations and judgment, she took a step into the unpredictable. As they moved the first heavy armoire, Jake's muscles flexed, and Sarah couldn't help but notice the effortless ease with which he maneuvered the bulky item. "Wow, you're strong," she blurted, a hint of admiration slipping through her practiced walls. Jake chuckled, wiping his brow with a calloused hand. Just a daily workout, right? His teasing lightened the air, but also stirred something in Sarah, a longing for authenticity she hadn't felt in far too long. Suddenly, she was questioning everything, how her life had become a series of barriers built on practicality and fear. But was she ready to confront the implications of those feelings? She shivered at the thought of judgment, the whisper of her boss's disdain hanging over her like a dark cloud. Rounding out the hustle and bustle of hospital duties, the unyielding pressure from her law firm weighed on her. They were all too quick to dismiss men like Jake as unworthy, but in the whirlwind of moving furniture, she found herself captivated by his stories of struggle. Each laugh revealed more layers. A single mother raised him right. He spoke of resilience, and Sarah's heart tugged in rebellion. She longed to believe in someone beyond the suffocating boundaries of her life. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just when the mix of admiration and admiration threatened to push her over the edge, a call from work ripped the moment apart.
"Did you hear about the meeting tomorrow?" The voice was laced with judgment, a reminder that mixing social classes could lead to disasters. As her boss threatened to undermine Jake's budding handyman business, an icy dread settled in her stomach. What was she supposed to do? Stand by this man who had opened her eyes to resilience, or silence the yearning that had ignited? Caught up in the swirling tension, Sarah could feel the silence around her grow sharper, the stakes impossibly high. How fragile her connection with Jake felt in contrast to the suffocating expectations of her job. She had to face the truth. Losing him would shatter everything she had newly discovered, but embracing him, what would that mean for her life? The air felt thick as the reunion approached, and Sarah's heart raced with every revelation. Would she choose the safety of familiarity, or take a leap of faith, embracing a vulnerability that could change everything? The choice hung like a pendulum, and before she could grasp its meaning, she stood at a threshold, her future teetering on the edge of possibility. As the shadows lengthened and the golden light faded, Sarah took a hesitant step into her grandmother's house. The air inside was stale, filled with a ghostly silence, broken only by the soft creaking of floorboards beneath her feet. Each step felt heavy with the history embedded in the walls. Memories of family gatherings swirled like dust motes in the fading light, mingling with a sense of dread about the reunion ahead. Sarah thought of the impending family gathering, the pointed looks from relatives who questioned her choices, the law firm, the structured life, the austere boyfriend everyone approved of. The weight of their expectations pressed on her shoulders. Yet here she was, contemplating a connection with someone who was everything those expectations warned against. Each time she recalled Jake's laughter and the way he spoke about his life, Sarah felt a flicker of defiance within her. As she surveyed the clutter of vintage furniture and old photographs, Sarah felt a growing restlessness. She flipped through a family photo album, noting her young self mirrored in the familiar smiles of relatives. Those smiles never seemed to have the depth she craved. She needed to confront what had shaped her, the pressures that molded her choices, and by extension, her heart. Would they understand her, or would they push her further into the confines of the life they imagined for her? With a determined breath, she stepped outside, seeking comfort in the cool evening air. Jake was there, bent over toolboxes strewn across his porch. His hands, weathered yet capable, exuded a quiet strength that stirred something profound within her. It paralyzed her with excitement and terror. He looked up as she approached, the corners of his mouth creasing into an easy smile. "Hey, thought you might need help," he said, gesturing to a stray chair leaning precariously.
The casual invitation felt laden with possibility, echoing her own desires for a life more aligned with authenticity. "Actually, yeah," she replied, her voice lighter than it had been all day. "I could use someone who knows how to handle things." There was a sense of reclaiming power in that statement. It was a commitment to herself, to explore what it meant to feel empowered rather than confined. As they worked under the fading sky, the rhythmic sound of tools and shared laughter began smoothing out the jagged edges of her doubts. Sarah tackled the chair with renewed vigor, realizing it was more than just a piece of furniture. It was a symbol of her need to appreciate the imperfect aspects of life. Jake's playful banter kept the atmosphere light, but she could feel the undertones of deeper discussions simmering beneath the surface. "What made you choose law?" Jake asked, leaning against the railing, watching her intently. There was no judgment in his gaze, only a genuine curiosity that set her at ease. "Honestly, it was practical," she said, tightening her grip on the tool she'd been holding. "But I often wonder if it's what I really want." The admission hung in the air, heavy but liberating. Jake nodded, contemplative. "You know, in my world, following the safe path never guarantees fulfillment. I learned that the hard way." His words were a soft challenge, nudging her toward self-reflection. His insight struck deep. Was she willing to release the practical facade she had built? The worries about reputation and societal approval swirled in her mind. Questions ricocheted. What if pursuing a life filled with passion meant leaving some connections behind? What if that included her career? Deciding to be honest, Sarah took a breath. "Sometimes I want more than security, you know? I want to create, to feel alive with passion, not just exist within confines." Her heart raced as she met his gaze, vulnerability spilling over. Jake smiled back, a flicker of understanding igniting between them. "Then find it. You seem like you need to discover what that looks like for you." That revelation felt like a door creaking open. She stood at the threshold of possibilities, sidestepping the fear that had dictated so much of her life. But just as the warmth of the moment enveloped them, her phone buzzed with a reminder of the impending meeting, a reality check that clawed at her newly kindled determination. The text said everything. "Must prioritize work. Remember your commitments." She glanced at Jake's face, now clouded with unspoken doubts. Could she forge ahead in this new direction, risking everything she had, or would the fear of what lay beyond snuff out the flicker of courage igniting within her? And just like that, the choice loomed large, a fork in the road that would define her path. The buzzing phone felt more like a siren, beckoning her back into familiar chaos. With a quick inhale, Sarah steeled herself, ready to decide if that small glimmer of hope would be enough to guide her through the storms ahead. The moment had arrived, everything hung in fragile balance. With a determined heart, she wondered if now was the time to heed newfound wisdom and embrace the true strength she had yet to uncover. The air seemed to thicken around Sarah as she considered the weight of her commitments. The familiar buzz of her phone felt like chains shackling her to a life of predictability. That message, a reminder of a scheduled meeting, was a stark contrast to the liberating interactions she had just shared with Jake. The push and pull of expectation versus desire tightened around her. "I should probably head back," she said, her voice wavering slightly as she turned the phone in her hand. She felt Jake's gaze on her, a magnet drawing her in even as she tried to pivot away from this new, exhilarating territory. "Or you could stay," Jake countered, a soft challenge in his tone. "What if you allowed yourself just one more moment to explore what you really want?" His words resonated with a truth Sarah had buried deep beneath layers of obligation and judgment. The idea of pushing boundaries felt almost intoxicating, but the fear lingered, whispering familiar refrains of inadequacy. Every commitment she clung to became a reminder of what was deemed acceptable, but at the expense of who she was becoming. "Do you really think there's more to life than just this?" Sarah gestured broadly, encompassing both her career and the expectations of her family. "Do you think it's possible to feel truly alive?" Jake's smile broadened, revealing a sincerity that engaged her entirely. "I can't promise you it'll be easy," he replied, leaning closer, "but I can promise you it'll be worth it. Sometimes you have to wreck the furniture in order to see the space you want to fill with something meaningful. A rush of warmth surged through her, momentarily erasing the chill of fear. He was suggesting a reshaping of her entire existence, something she had never dared to consider. Just last week, she had finalized plans for a project at the firm that would solidify her career, a project that now felt exhausting to her soul. What would happen if you chose not to take that meeting? Jake asked suddenly, his voice steady and unwavering. What if you stared that choice in the face and said, "Not today"? The thought sent a thrill of rebellion through her. There would be consequences, she countered, voice barely above a whisper, as if fearing he would shatter her brave new thought. I would be letting down everyone who expects me to succeed. His expression softened. But what about your expectations of yourself? You deserve to confront that discomfort, Sarah. In that moment, something inside her began to shift. A thick fog of doubt slowly lifted. Jake's encouragement felt like a lifeline, yanking her from a world where compliance overshadowed passion.
His support was a radical departure from the conformity she experienced within her family and job. But what if, she hesitated, the crossroads before her bursting with infinite possibilities? What if I actually commit to seeking what I want? Exactly, Jake finished her thought with a calm assurance. Commitment isn't just to others. It's about being loyal to your own dreams. With each word, Sarah could feel a new kind of bravery bubbling to the surface. It wasn't just about rejecting her past. This choice was about claiming ownership of her future. But even as clarity emerged, concerns crept back in. Uncertainty about how her family would respond, how the firm would react, how she would manage this new path without spiraling into chaos. A resolve solidified within her. She wouldn't allow fear to dictate her choices. I'll think about it, she found herself saying. Feeling a strange mix of relief and apprehension, Jake reached for her hand, a simple gesture that felt electrifying. Just remember, whatever you decide, it's your choice. You define your success, not anyone else. His words wrapped around her like an embrace, encouraging her to see beyond limitations. Though the shadows of expectation remained, a flicker of light beckoned her to step into the unknown, a thrill she hadn't known she craved. But before she could fully process her emboldened stance, her phone buzzed again, this time more aggressively. Sarah glanced at the screen, and her heart sank. They need my response now. I have to get back. The weight of the decision pressed heavier than before. She was standing on the cusp of transformation, but reality was tugging her back, competing commitments waiting to pull her down into the familiar depths. What will you do? Jake's voice was a steady anchor against the tide of her indecision. His gaze demanded the honesty she'd avoided for too long. Sarah squared her shoulders, uncertainty swirling within, but the desire for change flickered defiantly. Could she finally summon the courage to tear herself away from the conventional? And as the question hung in the air like a taut string, she realized her next steps would define not just her future, but the very essence of who she was becoming. The tension between security and self-actualization loomed larger than life, and Sarah felt the universe conspire to push her choice to the forefront. Let's see what happens when the truth is finally uncovered, she whispered to herself, anticipation electrifying her very core, waiting to dive into the depths of her own desire and bravery. The cool rush of evening air welcomed Sarah as she stepped back from the sanctuary of her conversation with Jake. Each step she took felt heavier, a physical manifestation of the conflict deep within her. The weight of the phone in her pocket was no longer just a device. It was a ticking clock, counting down the moments until she would have to face what she had been avoiding. Her mind raced. The conversation had ignited something in her, a possibility of change that felt both thrilling and terrifying. As she made her way towards her office, she couldn't shake Jake's words from her mind. How easily he had called out her fears and framed them as shackles, reminders of a life lived at half-mast. To say she had been floating by would be an understatement. Her days were filled with routine meetings, endless emails, and a schedule crafted from others' expectations. And now the idea of defying that norm was worming its way into the periphery, demanding consideration, nudging at her soul to take stock of her desires. The lights in the office flickered above her as she entered. As she moved to her desk, she glanced at the project proposal that awaited her attention. It loomed there like a specter, a demand for her compliance. She bit her lip, feeling a surge of bitterness crawl into her veins. This project was emblematic of the success she had been pursuing, a success her parents celebrated and her colleagues envied. But what good was success if it felt hollow? The realization struck her like a thunderbolt. She could no longer ignore the gnawing dissatisfaction that had been her uninvited companion. The very idea of sacrificing her either-or existence gave her a jolt of exhilaration, yet the uncertainty of what next loomed like a question left unanswered. Casting a furtive glance around the nearly empty office, Sarah moved to the communal space where her coworkers often gathered. She hesitated, watching as two of her colleagues animatedly discussed plans for future projects that seemed to align with the narrow pathways approved by their upper management. The stark contrast between their enthusiasm and her own lethargy was a swipe to her gut. Her heart raced as vivid flashes of Jake's smile crossed her memory, and she felt a waning thread of camaraderie with the people around her who were so deeply entrenched in their own expectations. What if she challenged herself to reimagine her contribution? She could redirect her energies towards projects that sparked her passion rather than ones that solidified her status. The idea of pursuing creativity, exploration, anything that invigorated her felt radical, but perhaps was exactly what she craved. With newfound clarity, Sarah took out her phone and stared at the messaging app. A voice from outside her own, one that had been nurtured by fear, urged her to respond affirmatively to the previous demand. But what if she did the opposite? With shaking hands and a racing heart, she began typing a response. "I'm not able to attend the meeting." Just as she pressed send, her heart surged with mixed reactions. Relief wrestled with anxiety. She had done it. She had taken a step toward the unknown, a step toward herself. However, thrill mixed with despair as she understood the implications of her decision. What if her boss retaliated?
What if they decided she was no longer fit for the team? The very foundations of her professional identity rested on other people's opinions, and she was beginning to dismantle that structure piece by piece. Her phone buzzed again, and with growing apprehension she checked the screen. The familiar name sent a cold shiver through her. "We need to discuss your commitment to the team. This isn't like you." It was her supervisor. Trapped, suspended between two worlds, the one she craved and the one she had to navigate, she felt the pull of regret and fear rising like a tide. As she stared at the screen, questions started to swirl anew in her mind. How would she face this confrontation? Would she fold to the expectations, or would she muster the courage to defend her choice? As the gravity of her actions settled into an almost palpable tension, Sarah realized she stood on the precipice of a new chapter, not just in her career, but in her life. The defining moment approached, and the stakes had never been higher. With a deep breath, she prepared to answer, knowing that this moment could very well shape her path forward. The time had come to face the music, to confront the friction between her past obligations and her emerging identity. As she crafted her reply, a surge of determination filled her. This was not merely about compliance. This was about her life. The moment was no longer just about a simple decision. It was about declaring her right to define her narrative. She hit send and steeled herself for what lay ahead. Would the fallout from breaking free strengthen her resolve, or would it bring her spiraling back to conformity? The suspense hung heavily in the air, the next chapter of her evolution waiting to unfold. The soft buzz of her phone felt like an intrusion in the heavy silence of her thoughts. Sarah noticed for the first time how the lighting in the office seemed stark and unforgiving, almost as if the overhead fluorescents were spotlighting her uncertainty. Each flicker of the lights echoed her internal conflict, a battle between the familiar and the uncharted, grounded by the need for safety, but driven by an urgent desire for authenticity. She took a moment before responding to her supervisor. With one deep breath, she centered herself. "I want to discuss this," she typed back, her fingers steadying despite her racing heart. This was a pivotal moment. She was no longer just an employee fulfilling demands. She was stepping into a more defined role, one that involved asserting her choices and desires. The minutes that followed stretched agonizingly. The glow of the screen felt accusatory, magnifying her second-guessing. What if her supervisor dismissed her shifts in intention as mere whimsy, rather than the deep introspection that had brought her here? What if her stance was seen as rebellion, rather than a quest for clarity?
A web of conflicting thoughts ensnared her, but at the core she felt the emergence of a new understanding. Her hesitations had always stemmed from letting others dictate her worth. A reaction pinged back almost too quickly. It felt rehearsed, a pre-packaged response designed to exert control.
Meet me in my office first thing in the morning. I need to understand what's going on."
The tone felt like a warning, laced with disapproval, but Sarah stole the quiet assurance to return her gaze back to her work. The night had turned into a battleground between prescribed expectations and her awakening ambition. The echo of her colleagues' fervent conversations faded to a hum as she gathered her thoughts. She shifted gears in her mind, envisioning a spectrum of possibilities, a new path defined not by limitations, but by the very essence of her being. Here was the challenge. Here lay the opening for something transformative. What would it feel like to create a project fully in alignment with her values? She craved to engage in endeavors that not only showcased her talents, but also stirred her passion. A vision crystallized, a project centered around mental wellness resources in the workplace, which could connect people to their emotions while enhancing productivity. It was a concept that could emerge from her own struggles and victories, a bridge between her professional aspirations and personal experiences. The exhilaration of the idea surged through her veins, yet a lingering thought tugged at the edge of her optimism. Was she prepared enough to recommend such a project, especially when her current standing felt tenuous? Steeling her resolve, Sarah opened a new document on her computer. Slowly, she began mapping out her plan, infusing each bullet point with clarity and conviction. The action felt empowering, as if writing could offer credibility to her voice. The night wore on, and Sarah lost herself in the labyrinth of her ideas, each outline forever unwrapping the layers of her self-imposed restrictions. However, the underlying apprehension nagged at her. Tomorrow would present a crucial confrontation, and she would need to navigate it with that same tenacity she felt when creating her proposal. Would she fully present her vision to her supervisor? Was this dream worth the risk? Even as admiration bubbled within her over these newfound perspectives, she fought against the pull of doubt. Her eyes flicked toward the window. Darkness had settled outside, a world edged in possibilities just beyond her glass cage. Then her phone rang again, a quick reminder that her reality was waiting just beyond her newfound resolve. Reflection engulfed her as she imagined the words she would need tomorrow. She was on the brink, a charged moment suspended in what felt like destiny. Would she assertively step into this new narrative, ready to command respect for the unfolding chapters of her career?
The time had come for a reckoning, and tomorrow she would forsake her silence. She would not only reclaim her voice, but would define it more profoundly than before. The morning would arrive, bringing the sharp edge of confrontation, and Sarah prepared herself for what lay ahead, knowing that the outcome could redefine everything she understood about herself and her work. The truth she sensed lingered on the horizon, waiting to be unveiled. Would she find the strength to champion her vision, or would fear thrust her once more into the shadows? The night felt infinitely long, stretching the hours into a contemplative haze. Sarah watched as city lights blinked through the window, sending scattered illuminations onto her desk, a surreal contrast to the ever-thickening anxiety swirling inside her. Every faint noise became a reminder of the approaching dawn, while each tick of the clock echoed in her mind, amplifying the urgency of the decision she would soon face. With her laptop still open beside her, untouched yet teeming with ideas, Sarah felt the weight of her proposal pressing into her thoughts. What if it failed? What if she miscalculated her readiness? The hesitance loomed larger than her aspirations, making every mere whisper of ambition feel muted beneath the heavy shroud of self-doubt. While she sat still, she almost neglected the power brewing inside her, the passion ignited by her personal struggles, which had been waiting far too long in the background. This wasn't just about a project, it was about her journey of self-discovery. As the clock struck midnight, her phone buzzed once more, drawing her from the depths of her ruminations. It was a message from a friend, casually checking in, but it sparked something within her. Would telling someone about her goal possibly ease the burden? Maybe she needed to anchor herself to someone who would offer perspective. In a moment of inspiration, she fired off a quick reply detailing her project idea, the potential benefits, and the purpose behind it. Watching the three little dots indicating her friend was typing back, the anticipation simultaneously excited and terrified her. When the reply came through, it was met with enthusiastic support, a reminder that vulnerability does lead to connection, not just fear. That small exchange recharged her clarity about the purpose driving her ambitions. The fire once again flickered brightly inside her. Sarah began typing notes about her project, each sentence carving a pathway towards transformation. She visualized how wellness resources could revolutionize the office atmosphere, creating an environment that championed mental health rather than neglected it. This idea represented more than a professional initiative. It was a wake-up call to herself, her potential concealed beneath self-doubt. The hours drifted by, and with each passing moment, she built a stronger case for the proposal.
She sketched out timelines, potential workshops, even suggestions for guest speakers who could reignite a sense of community. The darkness outside her window faded, overtaken by the nascent light of dawn filtering through the blinds. In this light, Sarah perceived not only the day's arrival, but also her own empowerment. It was a moment of deep personal connection to her burgeoning purpose. The paper in front of her was no longer just a collection of ideas. It was a declaration of her values. She was weaving her own narrative and constructing a foundation from which to demand respect for her vision. Yet the specter of confrontation lingered in the back of her mind. Her supervisor's office awaited, patience for the inevitable clash between her ambitions and any resistance she might face. As she gathered her notes, Sarah felt the weight of her determination. She pictured herself sitting across from her supervisor, words prepared and clarity at the forefront of her mind. It would not just be her proposal. This would be her statement of purpose, a roadmap for her professional identity and growth. The very act of presenting it would echo her desire to lead with authenticity, signaling that she was ready to claim her voice and elevate her narrative. Moments before stepping into the office, a wave of doubt threatened to consume her. What would it mean to stand firmly within her truth? What if it was rejected? But before the fear could solidify, she reminded herself of the journey that brought her here, each confrontation leading her closer to resilience. The decision was not about her supervisor's approval, but rather her own unshakable belief molded from within. The door loomed ahead, a threshold between silence and dialogue. She inhaled deeply and opened it, ready to engage in the heart of her own transformation. Prepared to confront the doubts, she stepped into the light of this new day, claiming the authority over her voice with burning conviction. As she approached her supervisor's desk, the mixed feelings surged again, nervousness intertwined with resolve. Sarah thought, what lies behind this door might shape not only my project, but the way I perceive my potential. Little did she know, the true challenge might arise not just from her supervisor's response, but from her own unraveling of suppressed fears buried deep within her. An unexpected revelation awaited her, testing everything she had discovered about herself so far. As Sarah closed the door behind her, the atmosphere shifted. The hum of the office seemed louder, the whispers of her colleagues somehow amplified. Her supervisor, with his neatly organized desk and watchful demeanor, looked up, tension wrapping around the moment like a heavy cloak. "Good morning, Sarah," he said, a hint of curiosity in his voice, yet tempered by a flash of skepticism. She returned a hesitant smile, unsteady in her resolve.
Yet, deep within her, a fire flickered, fueled by late-night revelations and the support of a friend. This was not merely a presentation. It was her first step into the fullness of her professional identity. "Thank you for meeting with me on such short notice," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I've been developing a new project that aims to enhance employee wellness through structured programs focused on mental health." Each word brought clarity to her vision, which had simmered for too long beneath layers of hesitation. As she spoke, Sarah sensed a shift within herself. Her ideas cascaded out with newfound fervor, rich in details and passion. She explained the need for workshops, mindfulness resources, and the power of mental well-being as a cornerstone for productivity and creativity. With each point articulated, the initial tension eased, replaced by an invigorating sense of agency. Yet, in the arch of her supervisor's brow, a challenge brewed. "Sarah, while I see your enthusiasm," he interjected, "you're presenting a lot of information. Convincing upper management, especially regarding resources and budget, will be a significant hurdle." Doubt cascaded over her momentarily, shaking her grounded confidence. What if he's right? What if this is just a dream that can't see the light of day? The voice of self-doubt cleverly weaved through her thoughts, but she refused to cower. She was not merely fighting for approval, she was advocating for a vision that could tangibly impact lives. Taking a deep breath, she leaned into the challenge. "I understand, and it's a valid concern, but consider the benefits. Investment in mental health could lead to reduced absenteeism and improved employee engagement. I have data to support this approach." Her supervisor's expression shifted to one of mild intrigue. With her heart racing, she opened her laptop, showcasing the research she had compiled, a collection of statistics and case studies that spoke volumes. As she highlighted the facts, She felt an unfamiliar surge within her, a burgeoning confidence rooted in the knowledge she had gathered and the passion that propelled her. The reality dawned on her. This was more than a plea for approval. It was about empowerment, not just for herself, but for everyone who would understand the significance of mental wellness in the workplace. Yet, amid her rising sense of self, she noticed her supervisor's skepticism still lingering. The familiar ache of uncertainty knotted in her stomach, whispering that perhaps she needed more than data to sway him. "Let's discuss the cost implications," he said, his voice firm but not unsympathetic. His challenge was not merely a barrier, it was an opportunity for her to reveal the inherent strength she had begun to identify in herself. She paused, rethinking her approach. What if we considered a pilot program?
A small-scale initiative to demonstrate tangible benefits without a major financial commitment? Regular check-ins could provide immediate feedback, which we could use to scale as needed. The suggestion came from a place of practicality, bursting forth unbidden, echoing the adaptability she had so fiercely longed for. At that moment, she realized that she held not just her fears, but innovative solutions within her grasp. The capacity to adapt, to negotiate, to redesign her approach in the face of scrutiny. It was the power she had embraced in her journey. This was her professional development unfolding in real time. As her supervisor considered her proposal, a troubling realization flickered in Sarah's mind. What if she was inadvertently overlooking some crucial aspects of her own professional growth? Had she truly charted a path forward, or was she still shackled by the remnants of insecurity? Just then, the phone rang, pulling her from the internal chaos of her thoughts. "Can you hold for a moment?" he asked, momentarily breaking eye contact. As he turned to answer the call, doubt gnawed her. Was she prepared for the ramifications of her journey? Now awash in uncertainty, she reflected on her revelations thus far and resolved to connect the dots between ambition and vulnerability. Perhaps the real test wasn't just succeeding in this proposal, but in unearthing the deeper layers of resilience within her. As her supervisor turned back, the intensity in his eyes hinted at the possibility of acceptance, or conversely, rejection. Sarah braced herself, knowing that the conclusion of this meeting could redefine her professional landscape. She understood now. The real challenge was not simply in convincing others, but in fully embracing the complexity of her evolving identity, and it was a challenge she was ready to meet, head-on. What would her supervisor's response reveal? Would this moment alter the trajectory of her career and redefine how she viewed her aspirations forever? As anticipation hung thick in the air, the answer was mere breaths away. Sarah's heart raced in tandem with the clock ticking softly on her supervisor's desk. This was her moment, and yet the shadows of doubt still loomed. The phone call had sliced through the tension, offering her a split second to reassess. What if, despite her preparation, she faltered in this next moment? Her supervisor returned to the table, the glint of consideration still evident but tempered by pragmatism. "I appreciate your enthusiasm, Sarah, but enthusiasm alone isn't going to get this approved. You need a clear plan, not just the why, but also the how and when. Can you deliver that?" The challenge was laid bare before her, like a gauntlet thrown at her feet. This wasn't just about sharing an idea, it was about execution. Suddenly, her mind swirled, recalling each late-night brainstorming session, where the details had been mere sketches on paper, swirling but undefined.
Could she solidify those concepts into actionable goals? Yes, she replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. I can outline a phased approach, integrating feedback loops after each session to adjust as needed. That way we can keep stakeholders engaged and motivated. As the words left her lips, she felt a flicker of clarity. In order to develop, she realized, she needed to ground her vision in reality. If presenting the project was her first step, designing its execution strategy was an equally critical stride towards proving her worth. Let's create a timeline, her supervisor suggested, leaning back in his chair, already scribbling down ideas. She welcomed the focus. It was as if the clouds of whimsy were being blown away by a steady breeze. "Okay," Sarah began, feeling the fire within her ignite again. "In the first month, we could launch foundational workshops, simple but effective techniques that employees can start implementing right away. Then, after gauging interest, we could introduce specialized programs based on the feedback we receive." As she spoke, Sarah felt the previous uncertainty melting away, replaced by a pulse of energy, a sense of agency. Each idea she articulated seemed to build a scaffold for the dream she had passionately fostered. She realized that her ability to adapt, to structure her thoughts and ideas, was more than just a skill. It was a cornerstone of her professional identity emerging from the chrysalis of self-doubt. Her supervisor paused, deliberating over her suggestions. "This could work. Your willingness to adapt is commendable. But remember, You'll need to persuade the finance team. They'll want numbers, results. Sarah's mind jolted at the obstacle mentioned. Numbers, cold, hard, metrics. She surrendered momentarily to the internal debate. Did she have the proficiency to dig deeper into quantitative results? What if her curiosity faltered when faced with data analysis? Yet just as quickly, a thought emerged. This was not about her limitations. This was an opportunity to learn, to grow. I'll work on that, she asserted, an equilibrium forming. I can partner with HR and the finance department to project outcomes. Together, we can establish the anticipated ROI. Her supervisor nodded, perhaps impressed, perhaps merely evaluating. It didn't matter. What mattered was that she was beginning to see the power of collaboration. She was not building this alone. She was part of a greater web of professionals, each bringing their strengths to the table. With newfound determination, she left the meeting room, her heart lighter. Sarah understood that this was not merely about getting her project approved. It was about unearthing her capabilities and molding them into a recognized professional identity. But as she sat at her desk, drafting the roadmap for her initiative, a lingering question nagged at her. What was the price of this growth?
Would pushing her boundaries leave her more exposed or finally free her from the chains of her self-imposed limitations? The clock ticked on, each beat reverberating with the dual promises of growth and vulnerability. This was merely the beginning. Her journey was unfolding in unpredictable ways. And as she prepared for the coming challenge with numbers, she felt the cusp of transformation beneath her fingers. What if she could blend her creative vision with the cold logic of fiscal responsibility? The moment of truth loomed, and she was ready to confront it. Was she prepared for the pressure of the next phase? Could her internal growth withstand the scrutiny of the external world? The stakes were high, but so were the possibilities. Sarah had always placed a soothing order upon her workspace, each pen positioned deliberately, each note perfectly aligned. Yet now, as she sat hunched over data from previous initiatives, scattered spreadsheets created chaos in her neat world. Her intent was to weave a compelling story around numbers, a meticulous integration of projected outcomes and return on investment. The discomfort of diving into unfamiliar terrain, tangled metrics obfuscating her grand vision, also flickered a whisper of excitement deep within her. The finance team's skepticism echoed in her mind. Were they merely gatekeepers, or could she persuade them to see the potential she envisioned? Time to dismantle her reservations, she decided. This was her moment to evolve, to transcend the limitations she had felt for so long. She dove into the spreadsheets, parsing through numbers that once seemed impenetrable. With each line item she analyzed, she uncovered insights about the effectiveness of previous programs. This was not just data, it was an untapped reservoir of stories waiting to be told, correlations that hinted at what would resonate. Here lay the truth of why her initiative mattered, a narrative that fused creativity with hard data. As days passed, determination solidified into a fierce resolve. Sarah sought help, unashamed now of her ambition to collaborate. She approached Greg from HR, a number-crunching wizard known for translating financial complexity into digestible narratives. I heard you're the go-to person for financial forecasts, she said, her voice steady. Can we talk about my project and the ROI I'm aiming for? Sure, he replied, his curiosity piqued. During their discussion, Greg expertly showcased the nuances of budgeting, giving insights into expense allocation and potential revenue streams. As they navigated the data together, Sarah felt her confidence spiral upwards. These were not just numbers anymore. They became the bedrock upon which she could build her case. The hours in their planning sessions transformed into exhilarating exchanges. Greg's laughter over such a dry subject as finance broke through her earlier reservations, allowing her to approach her projections with newfound positivity. She found herself suggesting innovative metrics alongside traditional ones, seeking intersections between qualitative success stories and hard data. If we can showcase individual case studies, victories achieved through our foundational workshops, it could ground those numbers in reality, she noted brightly. Yet lingering shadows threatened her triumph. Her supervisor had mentioned proving the value of her work to upper management, a larger audience poised to scrutinize her projections. She envisioned a room bustling with seasoned executives, their piercing gazes evaluating her metrics and intent. Would they recognize her diligence and creative evolution? The night before her presentation, Sarah sat surrounded by performance graphs and case studies, the glow of her laptop illuminating her anxious expression. The blended narrative she was crafting felt powerful. However, the weight of expectation pressed on her chest. Could she weave together the disparate strands into a compelling story? With each click, she rehearsed her delivery.
She was not merely selling a project, she was vowing to transform the organization on myriads of levels. Each time her projection landed on the screen, she envisioned the impact rippling across the lives influenced by her work. It was then that a revelation struck her. This was not solely about defending her project, but also about advocating for herself and the professional identity she was carving out. Envisioning the future, Sarah recognized that every step taken, every struggle confronted and conquered, tightened the bond with her professional self. Even as the clock ticked closer to the morning's presentation, anticipation danced through her veins. The moment felt monumental, a convergence of her struggles and triumphs writ large in the narrative she would soon unfold. Yet beneath that surge of readiness lingered another question. Would this moment validate her journey or expose cracks in her facade? As night faded into dawn, she felt the reawakening of her purpose, mingling apprehension with an exhilarating tingle of potential. The stakes were real, but so was her growth. Could she truly bridge the gap between creative vision and cold, hard numbers? The meeting loomed ahead like an iconic skyline, somewhere shimmering with possibility, yet shadowed with doubt. Was she on the precipice of enlightenment or mere disappointment? The answer danced tantalizingly on the horizon of her ambition, a test awaited that would demand every ounce of her developing identity. The morning sun spilled into Sarah's office, illuminating the walls that had once felt stifling. Today they felt different, alive with possibility. She stood before her reflection in the glass, straightening her posture and smoothing her blouse. Confidence surged through her veins, infused with the knowledge that no matter the outcome of the day, she had already begun to define her narrative.
As she entered the conference room, the air felt electric, charged with the energy of shared anticipation. Her supervisor sat at the head of the table, flanked by a mix of skeptical executives and supportive colleagues. They were there to deliberate, to dissect, and ultimately to decide. Sarah inhaled deeply, centering herself one last time before setting up her presentation materials. With a practiced pace, she began her presentation. The crisp pages reflected the hard work and collaboration of the last few weeks, the new timelines, the projected outcomes, and the testimonials from those who had experienced the benefits of mental wellness initiatives in prior workplaces. This was her moment to introduce not just a proposal, but her emerging identity as an advocate for change. "Thank you for your time today," she started, her voice steady and clear. "I want to present our path forward, which marries corporate interests with employee well-being, essentially refocusing our firm on the human element at the heart of productivity." Eyes shifted, interest peaked. She recognized the blend of tension and curiosity behind their frowns. As she navigated through data, showcasing potential increases in employee engagement and productivity alongside quantifiable mental health benefits, she felt a new rhythm. With every metric she explained, connecting her narrative to the numbers, the fear that had threatened to anchor her faded further into the background. "Let's not just be a law firm," she implored, her passion radiating outward. "Let's become a leader in mental health initiatives. By investing in our people, we invest in our future." When the presentation concluded, silence settled momentarily, as if all the walls around them held their breath. Then came the questions, initially skeptical, but gradually morphing into a dialogue which felt less like an interrogation and more like collaboration. Sarah found herself articulating solutions about budgeting, timeline adjustments, and even addressing potential management concerns with ease. Each interaction echoed the growth she had achieved, the transformation from a hesitant employee to a forceful advocate for authenticity and change. The committee's responses shifted from terse evaluations to nods of recognition, perhaps even respect. Sarah, her supervisor, finally spoke, a contemplative nod acknowledging the effort and data presented. "Your approach is innovative, and the method for presenting the potential ROI is impressive. We'll need to circulate this among stakeholders, but I believe we're heading in the right direction." In that moment, Sarah felt the gravity of what she had accomplished. It wasn't just about this initiative. It was about her emergence into a capable, confident professional who could influence others. As the meeting drew to a close and they began to discuss next steps, she received smiles and murmurs of support from colleagues she once assumed would dismiss her.
This was validation on a personal level. She had proven them and herself wrong. As she stepped outside the building, a kind of euphoria washed over her. Today marked a definitive chapter in her career, one that was no longer confined by fear or expectations imposed by others. The sunlight felt warm against her skin, illuminating the path she had forged. Sarah understood that she had finally conquered the limitations of her past, and for the first time in years, she could see her future. With her heart resolute, she knew this was only the beginning. She had broken free of confines, crafted a narrative that aligned with her vision for meaningful work, and established herself amongst peers with a sturdy sense of purpose. Journeying back home, she reflected on every step that had led her here, from the weight of familial expectations to her conversation with Jake, who had sparked the fire within her. She had not only advocated for her project, but for the right to pursue the life she truly desired, one where creativity and passion fueled her endeavors. This journey had proven that confrontation bore transformation. She would continue to navigate challenges, eager to embrace the next pivotal moment waiting at the edge of her horizon. Reaching her front door, she paused for a moment, smiling at the freedom she had reclaimed. It was not merely about achieving professional milestones or securing approval. It was about embodying authenticity and fulfilling her potential. She had made a choice to embrace her truth, and now that truth would guide her wherever she chose to go next. This was her triumph, her metamorphosis. For the first time, Sarah felt firmly in control of her destiny. You've reached the end of this transformative journey. Now it's time to take action. Subscribe immediately to the channel so you won't miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and help others discover these inspiring tales. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. We want to hear from you. And don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting this channel through these actions.